All right, well, enough of an intro. Let's build something. What do you say? So the next thing we're going to do, I'm just going to move to a free part of my canvas, and let's move this off to the side. We're going to build our very first thing. And this can be very, very basic. We're just going to build a line between 2 points. So how do we build a line? Well, I could search for line, and this happens to bring up the command I'm looking for, create a line between 2 points. I could click here to get this out, or I could go under my curve tab, because that's where everything related to lines. I could go to my primitive tab, because that's where I can see things, and I'm going to choose the create a line between 2 points. So either way works. Okay, so hovering over, obviously I need to build 2 points. So let's go ahead and build a point. I'm going to go to the vector tab, and I'm going to use this command, construct point. Now notice that as soon as I drop this, one, it's not orange. This is an active component and it's working. And you'll see over here in Rhino, I have this little X. And if I click on this component, you'll see that it's green. Well, this command is active because it begins with default values. So if I hover over the X, Y, and the Z, you'll see that a value of 0 is automatically input. And if I look at the output, it's showing me that it's created a point at 0, 0, 0, and that's exactly what I see over here in Rhino. Now, if I wanted to manipulate that, I'm going to show you 2 of the most important commands in all of Grasshopper. You're going to use these constantly. So let's jump right into number sliders and panels. So notice I had to hover over this output in order to see what was happening. Well, if I wanted to visualize that more easily, I can use a panel. So let's drag and drop that under the canvas. So if I connect this, and to connect, simply hover over the output little node, you'll see that a little arrow pops up. As soon as you do that, click and hold, and you can drag it into anything. So that's how you connect objects. Now a panel is sort of your universal blank sketch paper. It can receive information and display it, but also you can use it to input information. So if I drag another panel in the front here, and maybe I want my x coordinate to be at 1.5. Let's say I simply add that in, and now let's click and drag that into the x, and you'll see the point moved and the output updated. So you can use panels to review and as well as to add. Now if I want to disconnect this first panel, if I hold Control, you'll see it turns red, and simply trace over that line to disconnect. So once again, Control, disconnect. I can also right click on the input, and you'll see a whole list of things pop up here. Under the disconnect, you're able to select all the different inputs you might have. So here, I'm able to manually disconnect it. So that's good, but I would have to update this every time I wanted to change a value. The number sliders, which we actually used when we were showing that addition command, are a much better way of inputting numbers. So if I drag and drop this in, you'll see I'm now able to smoothly move my point around. And if I want to change this range, right now you see it goes from 0 to 1 with 3 decimal points. If I right click on the number slider, click edit, it's going to open up a window where I'm able to do all kinds of things. I could rename this to say my x dimension. I can change it to an integer. I can change it to only even numbers or only odd numbers. And if it's on R, I can change the number of decimal points that I want. And here, change the min or the max. So let's have it go from 0 to 10. I can set my value to whatever I want it to be. Nice. Now that was kind of a lot of work. And number sliders are the kind of thing that we use all the time. So there's actually a really nice shortcut to adding number sliders. So if I double click in the search bar, let's say I want a slider that goes from 0 to 2. I simply type in 0 is less than 2. Notice it gives me a little pop-up that says number slider. When I press enter, it automatically generates a number slider. It goes from 0 to 2. Now it's in integers. So what if I want it from 0 to 2 but with 2 decimal points? Well, I can simply say 0 is less than 2.00, and wherever I put the decimal points, it's going to use that. And now you see it's good to go. And there's one other thing I can do. Let's say I want it from 0 to 2, but I want it to begin at 1.0. Well, that's easy. 0 is less than 1.0 is less than 2. And again, it doesn't matter where you put the decimals, it will pick that up. So this sets the range and the initial value right in the search bar, and now I can plug that value in. Notice when I override a wire, it replaces it. If for some reason I wanted both of these connected, if you hold Shift, it turns green, and I'm then able to add both. See, it created 2 points. So if I wanted to deselect one, you hit Control and you override it. Okay, and I was deleting them just using the delete command if you want to get rid of something. If you want to copy this, so right now I want to have a unique number slider for each of my inputs. There are two ways. You can do Control-C and Control-V. It's a normal way of copying. But you can also use the click, drag, then press Alt. When you do that, you're able to create a copy. Now it's important that you click and drag first. If I press Alt first, you'll see it opens up this split the canvas, which is useful if I want to say add space in my canvas. But if you want to copy, you have to click first, start to move, and then hold down Alt. And one more thing about the canvas, so these are pretty disorganized. If I want to say have them all nice and squared up, if I select everything just by clicking and dragging, and here they're all selected, you'll see these little highlighted values on the side. Well, this is going to help me either, in this case, distribute them all vertically. I can align them to the left. So pretty useful way of keeping everything nice and clean. Okay, so all that work just to create 1 point. Well, and I'm going to delete this panel here. Our goal starting out was to build a line. So I created 1 point. Let's now copy this down, create a second point. The first one I'm going to put at 0, 0, 0. And now in order to generate my point, I'm just going to click and drag these two values in. And notice it generated a line here in Rhino between my 2 points. And you may notice that whatever object I have selected turns green. So let's talk about the previewing. So if I click Shift, I can select multiple objects at once, and you see that anything selected is green. Anything that's unselected is red. If you want to change those settings, go up here to this document preview settings, and there you can adjust the color and transparency of all those default settings. If you don't like the look of these points as X's, if you go to Display, Preview Point Flavor, you can change what that looks like. You also have the ability here to change the preview of different planes and add meshes, so have fun playing around with that. I'm going to put my points back to my cross. Okay, now every object is visible, and what if I don't want to see these points at all? I just needed them in order to create a line. Well, let's now talk about preview and enabling. So if I select this point, you see I'm down here at the origin, if I press my middle wheel button, it will open up a series of commands, and we want to talk about these 4 right here. So the first one we're going to look at is disable preview or enable preview. When I click disable, notice the point disappeared here in Rhino, and it turned this dark gray. So I'm able to use this in order to control what is visible. So now it's nice and clean, and you can imagine this will become very useful as you build much larger models where all of your constructing objects, the points that become the lines, everything before the final product is going to be visible and can be very messy. So it's important to turn things off. And you can turn things off in groups. You select everything, middle wheel. I can make them visible, I can make them invisible. And that's different from the other two. This here is the enable and disable. So when I click disable, you'll see that it turns this sort of shaded gray, and it outputs an orange line that blows up my line component. So this warning error says failed to collect data. Well, that's because when I disabled the component, I shut it down completely. So whereas disabling the preview, this is like turning off the monitor of your computer. The computer's still running, it's still working and generating my point, I just don't see it. When I disable the entire component, It's like unplugging the computer from the wall and shutting it down. And this is useful if you want to control which portions of your script are active, especially as you're experimenting. You may not want to trigger something downstream that might be very computationally intensive. You might want to turn off whole sections of your script. So disables like the nuclear option, it's totally shut down, everything downstream stops. Whereas if it's enabled but turned off, it's still working, it's just hidden. Now as you go, you might find that you're losing track of everything that's not visible. So I can select something visible, I can see it being highlighted, but if it's turned off, I can no longer see what it is that I'm selecting. And there's this really useful component up here, I call it the green button. When you click it, notice the line went away. Now whatever I have selected becomes visible, regardless of the preview settings. It effectively overrides your preview settings, allowing you to view whatever you have selected. This is incredibly useful if you're trying to interrogate your script, because it means that you can look through the script, identify which components are doing what, without having to adjust your visibility settings. It's also useful to know because if you accidentally hit this and you're wondering why can't I see anything, it's probably because you have this little green button selected. There's one more thing I'd like to show you, and under the display canvas widgets, I encourage everyone to turn on this little profiler widget. So simply by selecting that, as we continue, you may notice that I'll get a little pop-up at the bottom of a command. This widget tells you how long all of your components are running. And so if your script is getting slow, this will help you identify which component is taking the longest to run. It's very useful, and I encourage you all to just turn that on and keep it on.